Hello, and welcome again to our Be Well for Life series. We're talking about ways to improve our healthy lifestyle, to feel better, to live longer, healthier lives. And today's topic is coping with stress. You know, stress is something that everyone deals with. We can't escape it, but we can take charge of certain aspects. Charge of our thoughts and our emotions, take charge of our schedules and our commitments, and the way we respond to stress. We can't remove all stress, but we can relate to it in a better way. So our goal in this series is to have a more balanced life, so we have time for work, for relationships, for relaxations, and fun in your life. And as we put this balance together, we can cope better with stress. We also want to talk about resilience, ways to hold up under pressure and challenges in life, because we all have to go through hard times. And what are the things that can help us to be more resilient? So let's start out by looking at some definitions. Stress is defined as the body's response to any demand made upon it. Anytime we have to adapt to something, it takes energy, and that adaptation is stress. As long as it doesn't get too high, it's not distressful to us, but the body can adapt and handle it. Someone else gave a definition. It says, it's the general wear and tear of daily living. And it's kind of like a machinery. And you know, if it gets overly stressed, it gets worn out. So we have to have the times to relax and balance our life to keep stress from becoming a problem. Now, stressors are those things that cause the stress. They're the demands, the events, the situations in our life that we have to adapt to and to relate to. Then there's a term we use sometimes called Eustress. Sometimes people say, well, that's an oxymoron, isn't it? How can you have good stress? Well, there are good stresses, aren't there? Even going to work, while it may be stressful for us, it gives us an income. We can have a home, we can have a place to eat, stay out of the cold and the wind and the shelter. And so even though it may be stressful, it has beneficial effects. So we just want to keep things within the ability of our body to adapt, and then it's good stress. Then there's distress. That's when the stress becomes excessive, and soon it has destructive aspects to our physical health and to our mental and our emotional health. And that's what we want to avoid. Now, stress comes from many sources. There's routine things like pressures at work, relating to people, all the different responsibilities we have to meet each day. Even things like noise or lack of sleep can be stressful, can't they? Then there's the bills we have to pay. And sometimes there can be financial distress. And sometimes there's internal conflicts, problems with ourselves, a whole host of things. And all of these can be stressful. And they have an ability to kind of build on each other so that each one is additive. And pretty soon if we get too much, we're not able to cope anymore. There's certain negative life events that happen that maybe we have no control over. Maybe it's losing a job, or we become divorced, or a serious illness, or we lose a loved one. Maybe we have a run-in with a law, some kind of events that happen that sometimes we don't feel like we have a lot of choice in, or at least we get ourselves into those situations, and they can be very serious. So we call those life events, and they can be very stressful. And then there's traumatic situations. We can be in physical danger. Someone may attack us. Someone may abuse us. There are major accidents that occur that can be, of course, very stressful. And then there's natural disasters, hurricanes and floods and all kinds of things that happen. In some parts of the world, war, things we have no control over. But again, very traumatic situations that can be very stressful. So we need to look at stress and ways to try to counteract the negative aspects if we have any of stress, so we can keep our life in good health and good balance. So the first concept here, stress is additive. I mentioned that earlier. It's the body's response to stress is the sum of all the different situations exposed to. So maybe we don't have one or two very huge stressful events in our life, but we just have a whole bunch of little things that begin to add up, and they can be just as stressful as the one or two very large stressful events. As we mentioned earlier, we can't avoid stress, but the goal is to manage it, keep it within manageable limits, and use it even to our advantage when possible. A certain amount of stress is good, isn't it? When the alarm clock goes off in the morning, we have to get up and go to work. May be stressful, but it has a good effect. So keep that balance again. There's another concept that sometimes we think stress is out there. You know, somebody's causing me stress. But it isn't. Stress is our response to things. It's within us. It's our body's response to adapting to situations. We don't have control always of what happens out there in the world, but we can control how we respond. So here's a little model that kind of puts this all together, helps us to see how it works. There's the stressors. It might be a conflict with a person. It might be change that we have to do in our life that is, maybe moving to a new location or whatever, moving to a new home. All of these require change, and it produces a certain amount of stress, maybe loss. That's the initiators of the stress. And then there's our response. How do we respond to that stress? And there's modulators. Some people seem to have inherited traits that deal with conflict or problems better than others. We have life experience. If we've gone through a lot of certain difficulties and so on, learned how to handle situations, it's much easier for us than people who maybe haven't had those experiences. Our attitude, our self-image, all of these affect our response to stress. Is it something terrible, or is it something, oh, I can handle that, I've done that before? And then there's coping skills, things that we have learned. Communication skills, how to talk to people to resolve problems. Our self-talk, how do we talk to ourselves? Do we have a lot of, excessive condemnation of ourselves and talking bad about ourselves and putting ourselves down? Or do we say, well, mistakes occur, I'm not going to beat myself up over this, we'll try to learn from that and we'll move on. Relaxation is a skill that helps us, that we feel nervous and uptight and so on, and we can learn how to relax and remove that stress response. Having support systems in our life and developing good healthy practices like exercise and eating well, all of these help our body to be able to cope with stress more successfully. Based on those different responses then to stress, stress turns out to be eustress or distress. And as we said earlier, the eustress are positive things that can happen, and distress are the non-positive things, the things that are non-productive and destructive to our health. So whether it turns out to be good or bad, a lot of it depends on how we handle it. Now, let's look at some of the stress signals. This is just to help you to recognize, am I having stress in my life? And first one there, minor problems can seem overwhelming. Even, the small things we just can't seem to cope with. That's usually a sign that we're not coping well. We're getting overwhelmed. I feel nervous. I worry about many things. I can't stop thinking about my problems. We just run it over and over and over in our mind. Not coping well. I can't stop, we talked about that, but I feel frustrated or angry much of the time. And that's something that's very common in stress. We reach a kind of a breaking point and we lash out, don't we? Somebody says, I feel just tense, uptight, much of the time. That's a sign that we're not coping well again. Some people find that it disturbs their sleep. This is one of the most common things. If we're under a lot of stress, can't clear our mind and relax well, we can't sleep well. And for other people, they just feel tired and they have no energy. Another sign maybe that we're not coping well with stress. So when the body sends these stress signals to us, we need to recognize those and recognize we need to change some of the things in our body. I used this little illustration one time in a class about in our car. There used to be a little light. Now they have actually words that come out and tell us that there's something wrong with the engine. But they had this little warning light that would go on in the dash, and when that went on, we knew we were supposed to do something. We may not know what we were supposed to do, but something was wrong with the engine. And I had the lady in the class, she raised her hand and says, oh, Doc, I know about that. She said, my little light went on in my car the other day, and I thought, well, I'm going to ask my husband what that means when I get home. I was out of water. Really had a leak. The engine got too hot. She says, before I got home, the engine froze up, and I was beside the road, and they had to tow me in. She says, we just replaced the engine of our car. She says, I know all about that little warning light. Well, that's the way it is in our life sometimes. The little warning lights go on, and we have a choice. We can say, oh, there's something wrong. I need to deal with this. Or we can choose to ignore it, and then what happens? Well, something may go on down the road a ways, we get by for a while, and then something breaks, and we can have some very serious health problems. Now, how does the body respond to stress? There's acute stress, things that happen quickly, and we're familiar with these. Our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure will go up. We produce stress hormones, usually adrenaline and so on. The adrenaline causes the blood glucose levels, blood sugar, and blood fats to get higher. Those are things that happen to help us usually generally deal with an emergency situation. Our energy is shifted to our muscles and the brain, and we don't need digestion during an acute stress thing, so that kind of shuts down that part. You see, the body is getting ready to handle this emergency. Sometimes it's referred to as that emergency response that our body is trying to get ready for. The immune system is activated, and the T killer cells and the macrophages and those special white blood cells in the body are released to higher levels, again, to deal with that emergency. That's the acute response. And then there's chronic stress, not something that just happens once or something, but just kind of all day long, day after day, week after week, and our stress levels are high, and it has a different response. The blood pressure may remain high. The blood fats and cholesterol levels in our blood may remain high. They can cause those to be higher. It can cause our blood sugar levels to be higher, and can even be a factor about developing diabetes. And then the immune system, instead of being activated, it actually becomes suppressed. One of the stress hormones actually suppresses the immune system, cortisol levels. And so our defense against viruses and bacteria are depressed. Our antibody response is depressed. We're more likely to get sick. If we do get sick, we don't get as well as fast. Even the wound healing and inflammation in the body is impaired. And so these are bad things that happen in the body if we ignore those stress symptoms and we go on for large periods of time with high levels of stress. There can be symptoms, and you can see the list there if we look at this slide up close on the symptoms. There's headaches and backaches, and we don't sleep well and get tired and we worry and all of these kinds of things. Apathy. These are stress symptoms, again, that something is wrong. It can also cause some other longer going problems because of the stress. We get anxious and depression may come on. We develop digestive problems. We catch more colds and flus during the year. And as we mentioned earlier, we have sleep problems. People may gain weight, or some people quit eating and they lose a lot of weight. So it can even result in heart disease. We'll look at a slide or two of that in a moment. And we find that our memory and our concentration, the ability of the brain, it's impaired so that it doesn't work as well. So these are all things that we want to avoid, and we can do that by balancing our life and keeping our stress load within manageable limits. So let's look at this first study. This is the Interheart Study. It was a large study done in 52 countries of the world. They wanted to find what are the things that cause heart disease in all the different countries. Are there commonalities? And they found many commonalities, and one of the things they found is that in all of these countries, when stress levels went up, there was more heart disease. In fact, they found stress in its various forms to contribute to 33% of all heart attacks. Isn't that something? So a third of all heart attacks, stress was a major component. So here's the research that we see in the studies, 24,000 people in the study here. And they were simply asked the question, how often did they have problems with stress at work or at home? And those who had high levels of this, they were 45% more likely to have a heart attack. Isn't that something? Significantly increased the risk of heart disease. Now on the chart you can see on the bottom there the stress level, if they were rated as low, or if they often had stress, or if they continually had stress, and their heart attack rate in these groups of people over these many years. Well, that's a significant increase, isn't it? If they often had stress, it was a 45% increase. If they were continually under stress, twice as likely to have a heart attack. Well, this is good evidence to show that stress, the detrimental parts of stress, can have a serious effect on our health. They found that there were several sources of stress. One was financial distress. that increased the risk of a heart attack by 33%. That's worrying about paying the bills and we're going to have enough money to get by on and so on. Can be a stressor that affects a lot of people, can't it? And then the major life events, things like divorce or loss of a loved one, if there were serious conflicts between people in the family, they lost their job or something, a 48% increased risk of having a heart attack. So those life events can be difficult for us. We have to learn to cope with those. Then the last one, depression. People who became depressed because of stress showed a 55% higher risk of heart attacks. So the data is clear. If we want to live a long, healthy life, we do need to be able to manage stress well and keep it under control. Here's another study. It was done by the Oregon State University, and they took about 1,400 middle-aged men. They gave them a stress inventory, looked at what was happening in their lives, followed them for 18 years to see how much stress they had in their life during that period of time. And then they divided people into low, moderate, and high stress. And you can see on the side over there on the right examples that they monitored of stressful life events in their life during those years. Death of a spouse or a family member, major deterioration in financial state, loss of a job, marital separation or divorce, things that were significantly negative things happening in their life, problems with their child, assuming responsibility of a parent, major trouble with a boss or co-workers, and difficult things that they were dealing with. Now, they followed those people, and after 18 years, you can see in the chart here, stress levels on the bottom of the chart, mortality rates on the right, and notice that as their stress levels went up, if they had moderate stress on a regular basis, if they had high stress, they had a 37 to 42% increased risk of dying. Not just getting ill, but of actually dying. So it does shorten our life experience and causes some serious problems. And again, we need to be able to deal with this so we can keep that from happening. Now this word resilience. They found that people who were able to handle stress resiliently and it didn't bother them so much, those who fared the best with moderate or high stress or had lower mortality rates, they had some characteristics. First of all, they had good social support. They were married, they had friends, they had people that could help them. We find that social support is one of the most important ways of helping us to deal with stress in our life. And then if they had overall good health, if they rated their health as excellent and healthy, if they ate well and they exercised and they were doing the right kinds of things and got their sleep so that their health was good, then when they went through these difficult times, they were again more resilient. So stress didn't have the negative effects on them overall. Two good important things to help us in being more resilient against the effects of stress. Let's talk about this learning to cope. We said stress is unavoidable, but if it becomes excessive and continual, it damages our health. So what we need to learn to do is effective coping skills. We'll go over a number of these that can help us in coping better. It's essential for our good health. And building strong support systems, as we mentioned, very important to help us to be more resilient and improving our overall health. So there's three strategies: coping skills, our good support system, and improving our overall health to be able to withstand the negative effects of stress. Now, here's two common approaches when we get under stressful situations and we feel ourselves becoming stressed out. There's a negative response. The negative response is often denial. We'll just pretend it's all okay. It's like that person who sees the light go out in their car, the red warning light, and they said, well, it's okay, I'm just going to ignore it. Well, you can ignore it for a while, but if you do, as we've seen, some serious things can happen to our health. A lot of people take drugs. It might be sleeping pills, tranquilizers, aspirins, pain pills, all kinds of things, because they're having these symptoms. But that's not dealing with the problem, is it? That's treating the symptom. Some people turn to eating. You know, eating helps us to feel better. And so if I'm stressed out, I'll eat. So people binge eat, and then they drink too much alcohol. And this just creates bigger problems, doesn't it? There's indulging. Well, you know, things have been bad. I'm going to stay up late. I'm going to watch this movie. I'm going to sleep in the morning. find all kinds of things to do to waste our time, but we don't really, again, deal with the problem. Some people procrastinate. Some people worry, but they don't do anything about it, and they imagine the worst, and that just simply makes the stress worse, doesn't it? Other people may have self-pity, and emotions begin to get out of whack. And, poor me, all of this has happened to me. But it doesn't help again. It's just a negative way of dealing with the stress. So let's look at some positive ways. First of all, we need to take responsibility, don't we? We have to take control of our lives. If we don't, then we're not in control. We also have to set some priorities. What's most important? Do those things first. Do what I can. Then we may have to delegate other things that we're not able to do, to have other family members or get co-workers at work or whatever to help us with. I had a lady who worked for me that was very good at setting priorities, and I always had lots of things that I wanted done, and so I'd give her these different jobs. And so I'd give her a new job, and she would look at me with kind of that look, and she'd say, well, I'll be happy to do that, but what other things would you like me not to do so I have time to do this one? And so she set priorities. You see, there's only so much time, and it was a good lesson for me. We can't overextend ourselves. Whatever we do, we want to do well, but let's do it within our capabilities and not overextend ourselves. So that's where we may need to limit our demands. We need to learn to say no. I'd like to, but I can't right now. I've got too many other things. And when I maybe get my life a little simpler, maybe I can take on something new. The concept of taking one thing at a time. Again, it's limiting our abilities. So this one thing I'm going to do, but I can't do everything else. Another positive, of course, is balancing stress with relaxation. The relaxation response is the opposite of stress, isn't it? Everything negative that stress does, the relaxation response tends to do the opposite, tends to relax us and counteract those negative emotions. We'll talk about relaxation. But if we can't, you can't be stressed out and relaxed at the same time, can you? They're opposite ends of the scale. And too many times we're stressed out, and we need to balance that with more time for relaxation. And of course, a positive response is taking good care of our health, getting the sleep we need, getting the exercise we need, all the other good things, eating the healthy meals and so on. And of course, strengthening our support systems, taking time to develop relationships and so on, so we have a better support system. So we have these negative responses and the positive responses, and if we respond positively, of course, we're going to have a much better ability to handle stress in our lives. So let's look at 10 ways. Actually, I've added a few more. I think we've got 14 now. Ways to beat stress before it beats you. Things that we can do to cope a little better. So first of all, adopting a healthy lifestyle. Well, we've talked a lot about that, but there's important things we can do, isn't it? Smoking, skipped meals, late hours, those are poor health habits, and help us so that we don't result so that we aren't able to handle stress so well in our life. If we have a healthy lifestyle, if we get the sleep we need, if we eat well, and if we're well rested and we take time to relax and so on, then the damaging effects of stress decreases, and we're more resilient, and we have better resistance to the effects of stress. So you can see some of the things on the right. Being physically active, getting regular healthy meals, avoiding smoking and drugs and alcohol, taking time to relax. All of these things are things that we can do. And as we develop a healthy lifestyle, our resilience goes up and stress has less of an effect on us. So this first one, getting adequate rest, relaxation. We can't fight stress effectively unless we're well rested. I think all of us have experienced that when we're short on sleep, the least little thing seems to bother us, doesn't it? Something that didn't bother us yesterday is a big stressor to us now, and it's simply because we're not well rested. So we need time to recover from stressful events. If we've gone through stressful times, get a little extra rest. Take a little extra time to relax so that we can bring our life back into balance. We need to rest our mind as well as our body. And so taking time for vacations and little mini vacations as well as maybe longer vacations, gives us a chance to recharge and build up our energy levels and be able to come back and face life again and be more successful at it. One of the things you can do when feeling worn out and tired and under a lot of stress is the idea of just taking a little short nap. You know, some people do well at napping, maybe other people don't do well, but the research shows that if we can take a little nap somewhere in the middle of the day, just 10 or 15 minutes, just completely relax, it kind of just resets the body and refreshes you. And we call it a power nap. This was always something when I was working on a regular basis in my company. I kept an easy chair in the office, and at a certain time in the middle of the afternoon, I just closed the door and the people knew, time for my nap. And I would take that 10 or 15 minutes, and just within about 60 seconds, I'd be sound asleep. 10 or 15 minutes later, I'd be wide awake. And then I had another 3 or 4 hours during the rest of that day that my productivity level was just right at peak, very high. If I didn't take that rest, I just kind of mushed through, and I really didn't get anything accomplished because I didn't have that sharpness of mind. And so napping can be one way, or just doing some other kind of a break. If you don't sleep well, just take a little break and do something relaxing, going for a walk or visiting with someone or something that's a little different, just to take a break. Second concept after rest is don't overcommit. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Well, then we're going to have to start limiting demands, using that no word maybe a little more before we take on more than we can accomplish. Asking for help. If we're not able to do as much, we need to ask someone. Maybe in the home situation, we can ask our kids to help, we can ask our spouse to help. Everybody jumps in and helps. It makes the load lighter for everyone, doesn't it? And we have to set priorities. I think it's good for all of us to have a to-do list. And you can prioritize the to-do list. We can have those things that must be done today, things that would be nice to get done. And then the third category would be, well, if we get around to it, if there's time, then I can do it. And then focus on the things that's most important and get those done, and then we can work on some of the other issues. If we don't do that, then sometimes our time is filled with all the little things that really aren't important, and we don't get to the important things. So setting priorities, very, very important. And then, of course, delegating. We don't have time to do everything, and so we can ask people to help, someone to share maybe the household chores or whatever it is, and get other people to help us in accomplishing what needs to be done. Along with that, we need to be realistic. You know, our goals have to be within the realm of realistic, something we can actually do. Life is filled with many demands, and we can't accomplish everything, so we have to set realistic goals and expectations. Then again, the idea of if we can't accomplish it all, asking for help, talk to your boss, get help from a friend, talk to an advisor, how best to reach our goals. Sometimes other people can help us in dealing with those issues. And learning to pace ourselves. There's the old phrase, Rome wasn't built in a day or even a year, was it? It was a long time. So when there's big things you're trying to accomplish in life, don't try to do it all at once. You need to pace ourselves. I learned this when I was running marathons. You know, a marathon is a long race, 26 miles. I don't know if you've ever done one or not. But you can't just go out of the gate and run as fast as you can, because that only lasts for a few minutes and you're done in and you've got to stop. So you have to pace yourself and get down to a rate in which you can keep up for a long period of time, several hours, to be able to finish that race. Well, pacing ourselves in life is something that we can learn, and to be realistic, and it's helpful. Number 3 here is simplify your life. Sometimes our life just gets overly complicated, and we just can't keep up with everything. And we ought to look for ways, well, what can I cut out? Some things we're going to have to cut back on, time commitments or so on. Maybe we have to let go of some material things. Maybe we have just bought so many things and our credit cards are maxed out, and you have to have 2 or 3 jobs to try to meet all the bills and so on. Maybe we don't need all of those things in life. Maybe we don't need 2 cars. Maybe we get by on 1. Maybe we could live in a little simpler home, a little less expensive. And as we cut back on some of our expectations, then we simplify our life, and life becomes worth living again. There's a little phrase, living within your means, or even living below your means. So you have a little money that you can put away for difficult times. Very, very important in our life, isn't it? So sometimes peace of mind may be worth much more than the new car or the new home. Think about, what can I do to simplify my life and make my life higher quality? The concept of mastering one change at a time. We need to recognize that any change, it takes effort, doesn't it? And so if there's a whole bunch of things that's changing in our life, we're probably not going to be too successful in doing them all at once. And so keep our life simple during those times of life when there's lots of change going on. Maybe spending more time with your family and friends and your support group when there's a lot of major life events, going through a divorce or buying a new home or death of a loved one. We need to sometimes just kind of ease up on some of the things we're doing in our life and keep our life a little easier and try not to accomplish everything all at one time. And then number 5, learning to relax. Now some people seem to be able to do this easier than others. I seem to be able to relax quite well, but other people just seem to have things going all the time in their lives. And we can't be revving our engines all the time and be in good health. We have to have times where we relax as well. So just some ideas here. Taking frequent breaks throughout the day. We get concentrated on things and we work hard at it, but every once in a while, in fact for good health, probably every 30 to 60 minutes, we need to take some kind of a little break. We just need to get up and move around. It's good for the body to move a little bit, relax the mind a little bit, maybe get something to drink, maybe just a little walk for a minute or two. But that break is important so that we're just not continually wearing and wearing, you see, on the mind. If you're feeling uptight, you can practice some kind of relaxation exercise right in your chair. We'll do that in a minute with a little exercise here. And just stop for a minute and take some deep breaths and so on. And let the tension kind of flow out of your body. We call that progressive relaxation, where you can kind of start with different parts of your body and tense it and then relax it and feel the tension and then feel the relaxation and begin to feel how you can just relax the tension out of your body. There's visual imagery, taking a little vacation in your mind. I like to do that at times, where I just close my eyes and I think about some place where I've been recently that's beautiful, maybe warm on the beach or whatever it might be, and just put myself there for a few minutes. And if you can do that, you'll find that the physiology in your body actually begins to change, and just like if you were there. And so these are things that we can do to take little breaks. If we do that throughout the day, it keeps the stress level from building high. You see, you break the stress various times during the day so it doesn't build up to that high level. So here's this 15-second mini break. And you can just do this where you are right now. Just close your eyes. Remember some pleasant memory that you've had recently, some beautiful place that you were. And then with your eyes closed, first thing, just smile. There's something about it that when you smile, it actually changes, again, the physiology in your body. And as you smile with the muscles in your mouth and your eye muscles, we've actually been able to do research to show that physiological changes happen within your body that are positive. And then take a slow, deep breath. Just fill your lungs. Deep breath and relax, and then just let it slowly come back out. And feel the tension release in your whole body as you do that. Your shoulders may drop a little bit. Your abdomen may release a little bit, and your legs, and just find a comfortable position. And as you're relaxing, what you're doing is you're evoking the relaxation response, which is reversing the tension and the stress that's in your body. And then do that a couple of times. Take another deep breath. And again, feel the tension goes out as you relax. And as you do that, you can develop a more positive attitude in your body, and you'll become more productive in your work as you go from a relaxed state to accomplishing something. So little breaks. Here's a list of things that can help you to develop that stress response and the relaxation response you're looking for. Taking a warm bath. The warm water is relaxing, isn't it? Just close your eyes and relax there for a little bit. Wonderful. I heard the story of the man that was in England. I have a hard time coming up with names sometimes. That won the war in England. What was his name? I'll think of it here in a second. But he had a lot of stress during World War II. And he worked long hours. And how was he going to cope with all of that? All the things that was going on, the terribleness of the war. And he found that if he took a warm bath in the middle of every day, it just kind of helped get through that day with all the stressors. So that was his thing that he did every day. In the middle of the afternoon, he would disappear for an hour or so, take a nice warm bath, and have a good relaxation time, and then be able to cope the rest of the day much more successful. Winston Churchill, of course, was his name. So whatever works well for you. Listening to favorite music. Maybe you come home from work and you're uptight and you can put on some pretty music. I've been enjoying listening this time of this year to Christmas music. And it just relaxes you and makes you cheerful and happy. A good way to get that relaxation response. Maybe it's going out and going for a hike. There's something about the physical exercise that burns up the stress hormones and helps you relax. And you get out in the woods and the beauty of the nature, and maybe in a park or by a lake or by a stream or wherever it's beautiful that way, and listen to the birds sing and so on. It all helps to bring us back to that normal, healthy state again, doesn't it? Sometimes watching a funny movie and just laughing. There's something about laughing that helps you to relax. And actually, studies show that it actually helps improve your immune system as you become happy and relax. Your immune system, your white blood cells and so on, work more effectively in your body. Could be talking with a friend. Maybe the two of you going out for a meal together or something and relaxing. Eating itself is something that evokes the relaxation response, helps you to relax and feel good. We talked about taking a nap, playing with your children, watching a beautiful sunset. It's the idea of just little times during the day, try to do some fun things that help us to relax and enjoy life, and if we can focus on those, it helps us to cope better with stress. Here's a few more that people have suggested. Write in your diary. Sometimes it's fun to write out things that you've been doing and how you're coping, and just writing it out, sometimes it helps you to feel better. Meditating. There's different forms of meditation. My favorite one is just to meditate on something that's good and wholesome and beautiful. There's many Bible verses that's good to meditate on. Meditate on places where you've been out in nature where it's beautiful and so on. Thinking about good experiences you've had in your life. Meditating on a Bible verse. All of these can be things that help to break our thinking about problems and worry and so on, and put us in a positive mental state again. Prayer often helps as well. We can take our problems to the Lord, ask Him for that peace that passes all understanding, and He can help us to relax better and to cope better with life. Some people like to trim the roses, work in the garden, work the soil. That's a natural way to relax. Reading a good book, enjoying a hobby. I like to go out in the afternoon sometimes when it's sunny and warm and just sit in the sunshine. I have a favorite chair out under my palm tree. It's where the sun shines, and I can look out over the golf course. It's pretty green, and I just love going out there for 5 or 10 minutes, just relaxing. Then I can go back and work on the computer program or whatever it is that I'm working on, and it makes that nice break. So there's a variety of things. Do you like a massage? Learning to live in the moment, enjoying the beautiful things around us. All of these can help us to cope better with stress. Now this one, being physically active, there's been a lot of research on that, and probably of all the things we can do to cope better with stress is physical activity. Notice the things that it does there. It takes this pent-up emotions that we have and just helps to get rid of them. It relaxes the muscle. One study showed that exercise was better at relaxing the muscles than even taking a tranquilizer. It helps us to sleep better. If you're tired physically, we go to sleep better, we sleep faster, and we sleep longer, the research shows. Exercise releases these endorphins. They're actually substances in the brain that help us to feel better and to be happier And again, invoke that relaxation response, which does away with the stress. It distracts you from your problems. As you're working physically, we get these problems out of our mind. It can improve our mood, and it improves our resistance to stress. I was listening to a story once from Hans Selye, who is one of the great writers on stress. He told this very interesting experiment that he did, and it was done with rats. Rats, make good volunteers. He had 2 cages of rats, about a dozen in each one, and one group of rats, for several weeks, for about 10 weeks, I think, they lived in a sedentary situation. They didn't have anything to exercise with, no little cages or anything. They were sedentary rats. They all ate the same, and the environment was the same. The only difference was the exercise they got. The next group of rats, they put in all kinds of little cages and things that they could run in, and he monitored them to make sure that they got an hour of exercise a day for this 10 weeks so that they'd get really fit rats. In fact, some rats, he said, were a little sedentary, so they'd put them on a treadmill in the cage. They'd put an electric wire across the back, and when that bare tail would touch that electric wire, they'd get a little shock, and that motivated them to keep up so they got their exercise. He wanted to make sure that they were fit. Then after 10 weeks, he put them in a very stressful situation. First, he put the healthy rats and the fit ones into this situation. They'd touch one part of the cage and they'd get zapped with an electric shock, and a bright light would go off over here, and a bell would go off and make a lot of noise and scare them. And all, 24 hours a day, they had these things that would stress these poor rats. And after a month, he noticed that the health of these rats had kind of deteriorated. They were snapping at one another, they were fighting before when they didn't, and so on. But they made it through, and they lived, and they were okay. The next week, he put these sedentary rats in the same stressful situation, and at the end of the week, all 12 of those rats died and did not even survive the experiment. He was amazed that there was so much difference. And so he says that exercise is one of the ways that we can improve our resilience so that the body can handle stress better without it having the negative effects in our health. Well, make it a daily habit. Try to do things that you enjoy, because if you enjoy them, you're going to keep it up. It's fun if you can exercise with a friend. I know my wife and I, we like to walk together in the morning. It's more sociable, makes it more interesting. Play with your children. Maybe if you don't have time to do a half an hour all at once, you can break it up into 10 or 15-minute segments, a little in the morning, a little at lunchtime, a little at evening, but something to keep a daily habit of getting good exercise every day. And then there's the little things we can do. We can take the stairs instead of the escalator. We can walk to the store, or sometimes if it's close by, instead of always taking the car. We can do work around the home and in the garden, mow the lawn, walk the dog. Just being active, in addition to maybe regular formal exercise, in keeping our bodies active. And by being active, we'll be in better health. I like this quote that Ellen White made in Counsels on Health years ago. She says, "When the weather will permit, all who can possibly do so ought to walk in the open air every day, summer and winter." In other words, we need that on a daily basis. And if we do that, we'll be better health physically and mentally. And then going on, it says, "Walk, even in the winter, would be more beneficial to the health than all the medicine the doctors may prescribe." So if you want a good medicine, it's cheap, doesn't cost anything, just a little time. Getting out and exercising regularly, walking is one of the things I enjoy, one of the best things we can do for good mental and physical health. 7 is the concept of be good to yourself. Listen to our self-talk. What are we telling to ourselves? Are we putting ourselves down? Are we very critical of ourselves and so on? Or do we give positive talk? Do we feel good about your accomplishments? The psychologists tell us that depression is caused by always talking negatively to ourselves. And if we're always putting ourselves down, then pretty soon we feel bad, and pretty soon we become depressed. So be careful about how we self-talk to ourselves. Acknowledge your successes. Focus on your good qualities. We'll make mistakes, that's all right, but don't focus on the mistakes. Focus on the good things we do. Look for ways of building your self-esteem, things that you've accomplished and people that you've helped, and look about the positive things in your life and not the negative things. Don't be overcritical. And make changes where needed, but also learn to just accept yourself and like yourself as you are. That's the way that God looks at us. He accepts us the way we are. He encourages us to make changes where they need to be made, but don't be overly self-critical. So things that we can do that help our self-esteem, also help us to have better resilience. If we're feeling overwhelmed, just remind yourself of what you do well, some of your strengths, things that people have talked to you about that you do well. And if you think about those kinds of things, it helps us then to deal more effectively with stress. Maintain a healthy sense of your self-esteem helps you to cope better with problems in life. Number 8, feed your emotional life. You know, everyone needs love to survive, don't they, and cope with life. Experiments that were done years ago on infants, if they were just put in a hospital and all of their needs as far as food and warmth and whatever was taken care of, they found they didn't thrive. They also had to have that interaction with people, that love, that closeness that came from love from people. Otherwise, the babies would actually die, could not even survive. So we need to take time for our emotional needs, don't we? We need to have good social support systems. We need to spend time with people, developing our relationships, very important. And don't isolate yourself. If you do, you'll find that your health will deteriorate and you don't cope well at all with stress. That's why belonging to a caring church or some other support group can be excellent for people, because we have a chance to mingle with people, and people can encourage us and we can encourage them and give one another emotional support. That's all important for coping, having high resilience. Now, how about conflicts? Maybe there's something bothering you, and we can just stew about it, or we can take actions to try to resolve it. Oftentimes people will fuss about things, sometimes for weeks and months and even years, but they never do anything about it. And if we can resolve those conflicts, it makes our life more peaceful, doesn't it? It takes that stress away. So here's a little thought about resolving conflicts between people. It's called reflective listening. Oftentimes, when we have a problem, we may just attack the other person. And that usually doesn't go over very well, does it? They just usually, attack us back. So it doesn't really resolve something. But the concept of reflective listening, let him or her know you understand their point of view. So when somebody's complaining about something, you simply reflect it back. I hear you saying, and then what they're saying. And as people hear you say that, they realize that you're listening to them. And you can begin to develop then a constructive dialogue. When you're trying to express your own feelings, sometimes it's important to use the concept of I statements. I feel, I need, I think such and such, rather than just blaming people and saying, you do this, you do that, and we blame the other person. But you can say, I would like to have a better relationship together. I would like to be able to do things together. I'd like to have more time with you, whatever it is that you're needing. And if you put it in I statements, it's received better, rather than saying, you never take time to do things with me, or you always do that, and we accuse people. And you see the way that we talk, the way that we communicate, can help us to resolve situations better. Always good to explore alternatives. There's usually some mutual acceptable solution if you take time to find it. You may not get everything you want, but if you can work out a solution where both peoples have some benefit from it, that's always a win, isn't it? So look at ways of improving our communications. Here's some other ideas on that. Choose a good time and a place to discuss issues. Sometime when the person's not under pressure or got something to do, there's time to sit down and relax and work things out. Plan ahead of time what you want to say. It's good if you can kind of think it through and present it in a way that's not attacking the person, but helping them to see your needs and what you would like to accomplish. It's usually best to start with what you agree on, isn't it? Instead of always what you disagree. You know, here are things we agree on, we do well together, but here's an area I think that we can improve, that we could perhaps work better together on. We need to be careful not to discount or reject people's ideas. So oftentimes we just cut them off. That's a bad idea. You need to listen to what they're saying and somehow help them to see that, that's their opinion. Here's another concept to think of. but don't just discount or reject other people's ideas. We also have to be careful not to name call, don't we? Whenever we start using name calling and blaming and sarcasm and personal attacks and so on, communication stops and there just becomes a fight. And if we want to resolve things, we have to stay away from that. So if we be respectful of other people, respect their views, even if they're different from ours, and if we communicate in a positive way, there's usually a way that we can resolve a situation so that it's better than it was before. Keeping balance in your life. Sometimes it's easier to say than to do, isn't it? But that's what we need to do in managing stress. So just a few thoughts. We want to balance work with what? Well, with recreation, fun things. We balance weariness with rest. Disappointment with hope. If we're worried about things, we balance that with trust, don't we? We need to balance stress with relaxation, the two opposite extremes there. We balance doubt with optimism. Excitement, fun as though it may be, but we may need to balance that with some quiet times too, don't we? Loneliness, we need to balance with friendship. The rush and the busy with maybe quiet times and serenity. If there's a lot of clutter, maybe we need to balance that with order. And as we balance our lives out, keeping this in mind, then again, we are not going to have the negative effects of stress so much. We'll enjoy a much happier life. Number 11 says, plan quiet times. There just needs some times where we get away from all the hustle and the bustle, and some quiet times. Times of refreshing. I like to take a little time in the morning to study and read my Bible and to pray. And it kind of just sets the tone for the rest of that day. Puts your mind and your spirit in the right mood. And then we also need to have times to listen to what God's message for us. We may be reading a scripture, reading a good book or whatever, and then just some time to reflect. And what are the things that God is trying to tell you? I like that one in Jeremiah 29:11, where it says, "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope." Well, it's good to meditate on those kinds of thoughts, aren't they? And that quiet time can be helpful for us. There can be times for prayer and reflection, as we've talked about. And here's this Serenity Prayer that kind of puts it in perspective. It says, "God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference." So sometimes taking things to God in prayer, He can help us to appreciate and understand things better, can't He? And I like this verse in Isaiah. It says, "Those who wait on the Lord will find new strength. They will fly high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint." You like that verse? Sometimes we need to take time to wait on the Lord, and He can give us that strength for coping with problems that we wouldn't be able to cope with otherwise. Number 13, learning to love and to forgive and to accept. Sometimes those may be hard things for people, but those are the things that bring us together, isn't it? Don't be a victim of bad feelings between people. If there's bad feelings, try to resolve those feelings. Forgiving people, releasing their control over your life. When you don't forgive people, we may be the ones that are most harmed by it, isn't it? We need to let go sometimes of the hurts and the resentments and the bitterness and make way for compassion, love, and peace. We all make mistakes, and whether it's our life or someone else, we need to be willing to forgive and to restore those relationships. And when we forgive, it leads to less stress and bad feelings, it leads to healthier relationships, and certainly to mental well-being. I get a flyer about once a year from Harvard University that invites me to a workshop, and the workshop is called Forgiveness. And I thought for a while, well, why does a university, a secular university, hold a workshop on forgiveness? And because it's so important in relationships. And they find it's helpful in helping people's blood pressure to come down, to have better mental health, helps prevent depression and these kinds of problems. Just so important to successful living to have this concept of learning to forgive and being kind to others. And then the last one here, number 14, if we live by our values, then we generally have less stress in our life. It's when we get out of harmony with our values and do things we know that's wrong and so on that create this internal conflicts that creates a lot of stress in our lives. So sometimes it's good to look at your values. How are we living by them? Are your actions reflecting your beliefs? What really is important in your life? And are you spending time doing those kinds of things? So having values and living by them, another way to help us to deal more effectively with stress. This is one that I've liked. It's a verse from 1 Corinthians 13, and you'll recognize that. Sometimes it's called the love chapter. I used to teach a stress management class at a hospital where we had 1,200 employees, doctors and nurses and physical therapists and all the people. And in a hospital setting, there can be a lot of stress. And so I taught this stress management class. And one of the assignments, I said, well, go home and find this Bible that you probably got somewhere in your home and read the chapter in 1 Corinthians 13, the 13th chapter. Then come back next week and tell me what you think that has to do with stress. And it's a beautiful chapter, isn't it? Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoings, but it rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Well, it's a beautiful chapter, and it's a beautiful value to have in our life. And so I'd ask people the next week, what did you think of that chapter? And they said, oh, that's easy. If we all lived with the principle of love in our life, there wouldn't be any stress. We wouldn't cause others to be stressed out, and we would handle stress a lot better. So it's a good principle, good value to have in our life. So in summary, just thinking, we need to learn to laugh at ourselves in life sometimes. Don't take life too seriously. Someone has said none of us are going to get out of life anyway, so enjoy it while we're here. Develop good friends. Have hope for the future. Look for the best in everyone. Use positive self-talk. Don't put yourself down. Keep that self-image of yours high. Plan times to relax and have fun daily. Learn to accept yourself as you are. We're all going to make mistakes and do things wrong from time to time, but that's human, isn't it? So don't overly criticize ourselves. Accept ourselves as we are. Replace guilt with forgiveness and trust, and maintain a positive outlook. Expect good things to happen in your life. And if we have that kind of an approach with life, life will go a lot smoother, wouldn't it? So I simply leave you with this last verse in 3 John 2. I wish above all things that you prosper and be in good health. And as we learn to cope better with stress, we can enjoy that good health that God wants us to have every day. Another verse in Isaiah goes right with that. It says, you, meaning God, will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. As we stay connected to the Lord, we can enjoy the peace that he wants us to have. And that's my goal for each of us. Now, this week's assignment, as you have been following along in your book, there's places for you to try new things that will help you to learn to cope better with stress. You'll see Be wellness challenges for you. And 2 things that they're going to suggest. Do something fun and relaxing every day, at least 15 or 20 minutes every day. Build something into your life. Just plan for that. And that helps us to relax better and to handle stress better. And when you're feeling stressed out, stop right away. Break the stress cycle with some way to relax, a little walk, the visualization that we talked about, the little breathing exercise. And also, I just want to point out, in the back of this chapter, there's a place for you to take a little inventory. And it's a stress inventory, and it's just got 18 questions but it's probably one of the best stress inventories I've seen, and it gives you a score somewhere between 0 and 110. If you're 110, you have completely managed stress in your life and you're doing perfectly well for mental health and so on. And then it shows how to compare yourself and what percentage of the population is each of the different categories. Those who are coping well, those who are not coping too well, and those who are not coping well at all. And it kind of helps to see where you are. And take that little test and see how you're doing. And then as you begin to practice some of these stress management techniques we've talked about, see if that score doesn't come up over time and that you do better. Well, that's all we have for this week, and we'll look forward to talking again next week about our next topic. Thank you.